So hello, welcome all of you to Kran. As you probably already know, so I don't need to introduce the festival. I'm also not, let's say, the best person to introduce the festival. So I'll be coordinating this panel or discussion. So as I planned it, some artists are not satisfied so much with my plan, but we'll have to force them to talk about their projects for 5 minutes again. Then I will ask some questions. I will try to establish a debate about art in general. So here you go. Here's the microphone.
Okay. Is there going to be a presentation or? Okay. Yeah. I go? Oh, okay. Well, hi everyone. My name is Marta Bogdańska. I'm a Polish visual artist, photographer, filmmaker, educator. And here I'm showing a project, Shifters, and I'm sorry if I'm going to repeat a little bit because we just had a guided tour, and so I will say, but I don't know if you all were there. So my project Shifters is a project that focuses on trying to retell the history of animals in military programs, spy programs, in war in general in the Western world. And it all started with me finding articles in Western media, like mainstream Western media, about animals arrested for spying or being accused of being agents. And at that time I was living in Lebanon, and I started collecting this kind of articles that were usually first appearing in local Middle Eastern media, or it was in India or Pakistan or sometimes in Iran. And Western journalists would pick up this kind of stories and translate them to their languages, so English, French, German, and make a kind of a funny story out of this idea that an animal can be a spy. And this actually forms the first chapter of my book, so you can later take a look. And I was super interested in the way that this Western journalism was creating this narrative and taking these stories and making them into something like a mockery. So making a little bit of fun, while they would almost never put any context relating to actual Western armies using animals, which later I found out that was a huge story and a lot of archives. And that was in 2015-16, that was the very beginning of my project, kind of a spark. And I came back to it in 2018-19, and I started researching exactly that, the Western archives of military operations, wars, espionage programs, like for example what CIA was doing with animals. And it became like a 3.5-year research project, growing and growing, and it's still ongoing. And at the same time, I come from a philosophy background, so at the same time I've started reading some, let's say, philosophical texts or texts from history, like Éric Baraté, a French historian who coined the concept of history from animal perspective, which was super interesting to me because what he's doing in history is trying to look at animals as active agents of history, not as objects as we usually describe them from human perspective, but trying to bring back their emotions, their experiences in a more nuanced way, to somehow question this anthropocentric perspective on history. And when I started reading him and others and putting it all together, I realized that I'm doing something similar but from an artistic point of view, so like using visual material, which was growing. And well, the book has 850 pages because the book is the heart of the project, and was from the beginning in my head that this has to become a book, this project, that one of the main artworks that will come out of this huge research and me gathering this material and creating this kind of new archive will be the book. I also do other things in this project. So for example, I made a video essay which uses archival material, but also things that I filmed with animals. And I also gave a small camera to animals. So there is a footage which was, let's say, kind of filmed by animals. So it's a combination. It's a much more subjective tryout to look at this kind of animal agency. And there are also some quotes from important philosophical texts for me. Another important background, or like theoretical background for my project, was that I very quickly decided to only focus on internet. So I didn't do any traditional research for this project. I didn't go to any physical archive. I only looked on the internet. Because at the beginning it was like a very free flow research. I was really following my own curiosity to understand what is this animal spy, what's happening here, how humans were using animals in the situations of wars and military programs and police and Red Cross dogs and there's lots of things happening. So I decided to see if I can use all this imagery that's found on the internet, and very often it's like on Pinterest, very low quality, you know, sometimes like 20 kilobyte image. And I wanted this bad quality, this poor image to be present and to be telling a story. So retelling that perspective in history that could bring in some kind of animal point of view. And yeah, so the project started growing, and I also started making audio workshops. So I decided that one of the interesting points was to invite, I come from an activist background as well, so I try in many of my projects incorporate as well a participatory approach. So here with some musicians and sound artists, we create audio workshops and we invite participants to work on selected material. I give them, let's say, selection of 25 photos, and then they choose a few and they actually create a sound piece. And it's like storytelling through sound. So it's not music. I'm not a musician, and I'm interested more in thinking about different ways of storytelling. So this audio perspective was giving us also another access to animal experience, because animals also can voice their presence. I mean, they communicate. So in these audio pieces that are usually around 2 to 4 minutes, we sometimes use animal voices, but we often also use some abstract sounds. We use libraries online. We create a small studio where we record things, you know, happening. So people first come up with this concept of what they want to say more or less about a certain image, and then we kind of create sounds or compile a sound piece according to that concept. Well, I mean, maybe you have a question, or maybe that's enough for the beginning.
Thank you, Marta. Do you hear it? It's okay? Well, I'm Luciana Demichelis. I'm a photographer from Argentina. My project is called The Earth is a Satellite of the Moon. So sorry about my English. I'm from Argentina. English is not my primary language, so I'm going to be a little bit slow, like talking. Well, in this project, I start to thinking about the satellites as an object who represent different things to different territories. So I was starting to thinking about it because I have a friend who started living outside of my hometown, that is Ensenada, in a very far part. And he started having a lot of trouble with connection, so she can only have a satellite connection. So I started thinking about, because in the same time, there was the satellites of Elon Musk crossing the sky. And I was started thinking, what the fuck is this? What is this crossing our Punta Lara sky? And I started to think about, investigated that, and I started to realize that they are sending like 5,000 satellites per year, instead that in a whole career, spatial career, their countries send, I don't know, 10 in all the space career. So that it's a lot of garbage to the space. I find that out pretty interesting, so I started to think about how these satellites are made, how I could represent that in my hometown, like with my own strategies, like fictional photography and using like new narratives to tell this kind of story. So it was a challenge. I think it was like very interesting for me, because I started to using for the first time in my work archive photography, appropriation. I never did that because I was a very like, I don't know, like documentary photographer, because I'm not like that. But in a kind of way, I think that I was always thinking about the taking the pictures all the time. So this was my first time to make more fun and be more free in my practice. So I really like this project. I really love it. A lot of scientific, that is the same word that today, scientific, sorry, helped me with this project. I went where the ARSAT and SAOCOM is made there in Argentina. They gave me like satellite pictures that they were making with the satellite from my country and stuff. And I also appropriate, like, I make an investigation about how in the NASA archive they see our territory, like how they see the Cordillera of Los Andes, that is our mountain landscape. Because I find it out, like, in the caption, they use like caption that was like, oh my God, they say so much crap. It's like, I don't know, I have a picture from the project that is like how they see, I don't know, what they say, the Falklands Island, that is like Malvinas Island, that is the island that is still England colonized to Argentina. And it was like, I don't know, find it interesting how they represent, because we cannot almost see it in the NASA archive. It's like clouds and a very messy image. But that is like the only image they have for the island. And I don't know, the SAOCOM, that is our satellite, take a very bright pictures of the island, because it's so important for us to think about our territory and to think about that is a neo-colonialism, right? So I don't know, it was a challenge for me to make this project. We also make antenna, I don't know how to say in English, antenna? Okay, do you understand? We make an antenna with Agustin Basigalup, who was helping me to get a satellite image for the NOAA satellites. It was pretty fun, because it was also my first time experimenting with that kind of things. And yeah, I think it's like a very particular moment for me to be here, like talking about this subject, because in Argentina we're having so much economic trouble, and we're having like so political trouble with this government of Javier Milei, who is unfunding all of the technology and the science and the art and all that he can unfund. Like, it's shit. So I don't know, in a kind of way for me, it's a privilege to be here talking to you and showing this picture. So thank you so much to the Frankfurt Film Fair, Teresa, and all the stuff. And I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Should I try if it's working with my voice? Yeah. Hi, I'm Aminom Yousefijem. Sorry, I'm gonna repeat some of the details that I shared today with you, but I'm Iranian artist based in London, and I'm working with archival material photography, especially with the intersection of photography, photograph person, and the photographers, and the evaluation of the photograph person rather than photographers. And in this project, I was focusing on the portraits of revolutionaries in 1979 in Iran. To explain about each portrait before describing the project is that each image is the portraits of individual revolutionary from an original image of thousands of people in the street in mostly Tehran, in the capital, in 79, where I was focusing to find those individuals who staring at the photographer rather than participating in the revolution itself. It was fascinating for me how a camera can impact on a person and comes out from the atmosphere of the revolution. So I was using a kind of a loop magnifier on the photo books of the revolution published by journalists, documentary photography, Iranian and international, who were covering the event, and trying to find those who staring and find their moment for a second or a minute to make sure that the photographer released the shutter. So it was fascinating for me that how being part of the history, how recorded as a part of the history is something that people have this desire for it. And I was using a magnifier loupe, putting on the images, the original images, publishing in the photo books, trying to find those who are staring, making a portrait. So the hallucination of around the image is coming from the loupe, and I think pretty much that's it.
Hello, everyone. Do you hear me? Yeah. Okay. I'm Marcelom Topom. I'm from Belgium. I work a lot around surveillance and AI and algorithms. And with the project that I'm showing here, actually, it started within France when they passed the new Olympic laws, and specifically Article 10, which allows the French government to do algorithmic surveillance. And so starting from there, I wanted to look at what does algorithmic surveillance mean, and like which algorithms are out there. And so I started by looking at a live stream of a protest, a 3-hour long, and I used an algorithm to collect as much information out of that as possible. And like one of the things was the 30,000 faces of people that were there that I collected during these 3 hours. But then also another algorithm was like looking at the emotion, reading the emotion of protesters, but then more than looking on how are they used against protesters, I wanted to look how can we use them against the other side in protest, and in this case the police. And so I wanted to look on how can we use these tools of surveillance to survey them. And so I started first at reading the emotion of police officers during protest, but then I created an algorithm that can recognize different police units during a protest. But then I want to go even further, because in France the police has to wear a unique identification number in case of police violence. And in the last years the French police have, a lot of officers have decided to like hide this number. Or also there were cases that they were covering up for each other, and a lot of victims of police violence in France never saw justice for what happened to them. And so to kind of fight this impunity that the French police has, I looked at the use of facial recognition. So I wanted to look at like, yeah, how can we use this tool to identify these police officers linked to like their unique identification number. And in another part of the project, I also wanted to look at like how truthful can an algorithm be in reading something very human. So I looked more deeper into how does an algorithm recognize an emotion. And here, in this case, like most of them are based on the facial expressions that we do. And I found it like very interesting on how solely based on one movement of your body or your face, the algorithm will interpret your emotional state. And so I wanted to push that further and try. So we'll probably show later, but I then created like 3D models combining or like putting like non-human possibly emotions or movements, and still the algorithm will try to find something human in there. So like kind of pushing the algorithm to the extreme. So that was very quickly.
Yeah, thank you for the nice presentations. It's always important for me that also you can speak from your own perspective, because once you start asking questions, you already create a view on an artistic practice. So maybe first question that I would give to you, Marta. You also said that you come from a philosophical background and research in some ways important for you. So I'm a non-dogmatic follower of photography, And my question would be, do you always decide, even regardless of the research, that you're going to use photography, or does it depend? Sometimes you use video, as you said, or voice recordings, but how do you decide on that? Is it based on that you're specialized in one media, and then you decide on doing the theme that is according to this media, or can you also change it or shuffle it around?
Yes, I, I actually have a master's in philosophy, so I don't have a very traditional artistic path, let's say. I kind of decided to be an artist maybe 6 years ago. And I think that's why I would call myself more a visual artist right now than a photographer per se, because I think I just have this need to show many perspectives and the complexity of each topic that I work on, and somehow I never feel that one medium is enough, you know. So even with shifters, I mean, it's based on archives, and a lot of is archival work, and then you see these archival images and photography images. But from the beginning, I started doing these audio workshops. Everything kind of comes in and tries to tell a little bit of a different perspective on a specific topic. So I don't decide like 100% from the beginning what it's going to be. And as these projects are so long term, they also develop, so new things show up. I made objects for this project, like one exhibition we spent with my curators like 3 days in a gallery just sewing these kind of strange hybrid objects. I do collage sometimes, and because it's such a huge material, whenever I have a chance and there is space with curators, I always invite them to look for new topics or themes. And there's so many in this archive, so we create like very site-specific exhibitions. So that's another kind of work, you know. So it's growing, and it's open. It's open to new interpretations. It's open to local archives, because I mean it's not a finished project. I can still incorporate like local small museum archives, and I find things and could, you know, still develop. So I don't know if I answered your question. I'm using different mediums, but not like deciding from very beginning what it's going to be 100%.
Yeah, and thank you. It was a very good answer. So we already talked a little bit over internet, and
Yeah.
so I also have, let's say, some, let's say, view on your art practice. Yeah, for me it was the interesting thing that you were talking about is that in some way, as I understood photography in the classical sense before, you have to be trained, your eye has to be trained to see something. And then you try to catch the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But now I think photography in some way developed in a way that it's not only this relationship between the photographer, this thing that we call this, you know, thing, camera, you know,
Yeah.
and then the objects or the world that is around us. The interesting thing for me was that you said that you saw something that bothered you or fascinated you or something strange, and then in a similar way you start to make a documentation about it, not in a way that usually traditional photographers would do that, but you expanded the whole, let's say, field around it, and we can see many different, let's say, images that are in some way talking about something that you saw or that bothered you. My question here would be, also based on the research, where do you start? And
For this project?
yeah, or in general, and when do you finish?
I don't know. My projects are kind of open until I cannot do more. This project is, I think that it is not finished, but it's very advanced. And yeah, I think that right now we are in a moment in photography that we are like experimenting a lot with archives, because we find out that in a way how the people represent in other times of their moment, the pictures and the image can be reimagined and can be rethinking in other contexts. So I think like that practice could be a very interesting in this case, because I think that I don't know, how I don't know how the NASA archive, in my case, was working with this imaginary. I don't know 70 years ago. For me, it was very interesting to understand how they see my territory and how they see how they imagine the way that we must see the space in a kind of way. Then in I don't know, in Latin America, we reproduce a lot of stereotypes that follows United States and Europe. So for me, researching in that archives, I think that is very, very useful to think about how can we later create new imaginaries, right? So I'm now interested in that, like in a way, like using these archives, but also creating new image, because I think that we have there a lot to do. If you see the history of photography is made like for Europeans and North American photographers. They go to their territories and make image and they leave. So I think that in my case, like talking with from my territory, it's a political way to see the image and to see, I don't know, my practice.
Super, thank you. A very good answer. So to continue with the archives, so in the other way you said that let's say in this post-colonial approach, we also have to change history in the way that the perspective has to be changed. So it's not only one perspective, but you can see things from many different perspectives. Also, people that are living there should have a voice or a view on how their territory is perceived. And the next, let's say, not producing new images or new discourses, in some way you also produced new images because you highlighted something. But my question would be, is it still relevant to produce new images, or are we already in a phase in humanity that we don't need to produce new images, but we have to, in some work with materials that we have? If it's not a too complicated question, you know, not complicated or too broad question, yeah.
Well, I think this is a question that future can answer, not me. But I think the photography material has a potential. That was the thing that I was thinking when I was looking at the images of the revolution, that there should be a potential beyond the history itself. That's why I'm not mentioning about the revolution itself much, because it was just the content of the work. And I was trying to bring up a new context, a new layers of the work that talking about something about photography. So I think I don't want to make a statement that what stage we're going to, but I think the photography material has this kind of like potential. And this is something that specifically about this project was that for me that the variation of the photograph is it depends on the photographers itself, is a million of the variation that we can approach to the photograph, but the photograph person can has that kind of like making those layers and those potential, which I'm trying to focus specifically on it. And yeah, I think pretty much that's it.
Yeah, because as we talked already before, for me the interesting thing about this project was that people that took these photos used lenses to make photos, and now you again are using lens to do, you know, to give another perspective on a photo that already exists. So, for me, the interesting thing is this double, let's say, affirmation or negation, or how they want to call it. But you created, in some way, a scenery, or you highlighted something that otherwise wouldn't be seen and would be left forgotten in history. So I think this is a very nice method, and also it's very, very precise in a way that you're using the same methodology and everything, just highlighting something, not making it, for example, bigger or cutting it out, but very simply, just by using the lens again, you highlight something that was maybe a little bit, would be otherwise forgotten. Yeah. And it's a strong statement in the end, because somebody's looking at you, and it's...
So there was something funny that I was explaining sometimes about the work. I was explaining that the final result that I have here is the image that was capturing through the eyes of the spectators, the photograph person, revolutionaries, through the lens of the photographer, through the page of the photo book, through the lens of the magnifier loops, and then through the lens of my phone where I was taking the picture, through the lens of the viewers, the audience. So it was like a kind of like the different layers that can be break down and have like a context for them. And I was trying to be loyal to that layers, to showcasing that the trim of the paper be obvious, the circle around the image of the loop should be obvious, and the quality of my lens of my camera, my cell phone, should be present. So I try to show and keep those layers of the image through the final outcome.
Yeah, thank you. We all could continue, and maybe if we have enough time, we will do another circle, and then maybe the public can ask different questions. So one topic maybe that is also opening up now. It's a very don't get me wrong. It's a very important, also very popular. Of course, if it's important, it's very popular topic about AI and recognition, face recognition, and in some way, I will just give a short anecdote. I met a doctor in Vienna, and he specialized in face surgeries, microsurgeries, and he specialized in smiles. So he can reconstruct a smile. And then I said to him, how do you reconstruct a smile if the person after a car accident cannot smile? And he says, we look at old photos, and then we see how he was smiling, and then we try to reconstruct it. And then I said to him, but if you're researching this so much, he's very specialized in this and very pronounced doctor. I said, can you also see in people that are not smiling how their muscles are constructed and how much they smile, how much they are happy? And he said yes. So this is an interesting thing that in some way with this AI and everything we are of course doing also something new, but people already have methodologies that they would recognize maybe to connect. To your project, what do you think, and why do you think it's important to bring this up, and what do you think that will this have a positive? Does it have a positive effect also, or is it only in some way to surveil and to make, let's say, to give power to the governments to?
Yes. So let me start with the end first. Ideally, I would not want to make this work. Because I'm completely against all tools of surveillance, and this is going to link to the question earlier. What is so interesting about AI is that it's taking kind of an algorithms as well. It's taking an average of human research already before, which is data, and through using algorithms, you can actually show the bias, but the human bias that is already inside the data. So by using algorithms, you can show that. You can show the bias there is, like here with the emotions of like, oh yeah, just because someone is showing a little bit of teeth, that person is happy because for the training of the algorithm, they gave it 1,000 images of people posing and smiling, showing teeth. So like, that's why I think it's very important to talk about it, but I'm completely against it because these are all tools that will facilitate the surveillance of people and the control over people. And like I also always say when I get the question like, but why should we be afraid of it if we're not doing anything bad? And it is like, it's the normalization of these tools that we just accepted that it gets in our daily life and that the government uses it, but we don't know who and when will have control over it. So like, we don't know in 5 years which kind of government will be in power and which rights that we see as given might be taken away, and then the control will be so powerful that it will be like too late to fight back for these rights. And I wanted to add as well of the, wait, I had it in my mind. I had a blank. But yeah, of the algorithms, of like, it's, yeah, I try to visualize it because I think it's important to talk about it because it's something very abstract. Like surveillance is, you hear a lot about surveillance, you hear a lot about AI, but we don't know what the impact is or what it can be used for. And that's why it's important for me to try to visualize it so you can see the impact it can have, but also the impact it can have in your daily life. And and how it works and what it can be used for or what it will be used for. So yeah, it's important for me to try to visualize these algorithms as well and to talk about it.
Good. So, Marta, I will give you also another question if I can. So I didn't manage to see the is it called a photo book or is it just a book? How do you call it?
Maybe an artist book.
Artist book. Okay, super. Yeah. So the whole idea that you have already existing, like as before, you have existing images. Some objects you said you also create through the. But do you think, for example, maybe it's a very broad question, but do you think that? So book is one, let's say, way of distributing an idea. So one is also text that you also can use or you're using, or voice. What do you think that it, for example, telling the theme or the story that you're trying to tell, do you also decide on how to transform the, let's say, the images based on which channel are you using? Or does it, for example, how do you decide on the format? Or does it also work in a frame? Or does it work in this sense? You know, for me it's interesting that in some way, of course, it's a lot of work and like already made finding and selecting images, like in Duchamp's sense that you already selected something is already an artistic gesture. But for me also it's important that then how it's presented. And of course, as an artist, we also have to think, as artists, we have to think a lot about the presentation and why it's presented this way. And maybe you can just say something about that, please.
Well, maybe I will just say something about archives first, because I didn't really mention it. I think for me, archives are very living things, you know. I mean, I'm quite a thief. I feel quite free when I'm working with archives. Maybe it's a mistake, but I enjoy it a lot. And I do like to kind of take these archives and create something new and try to build my own stories and my own tales out of it. Maybe that's important to know, but to talk about what you're asking, I think in the book we used original images, like how they were, you know, more or less the sizes that they came in. So sometimes they're very small and very pixelated. When it comes to other mediums, like in exhibitions, I'm quite open. It really depends, as I told you, on the site-specific space that I get. Sometimes I do collage. Sometimes I create like new clouds or new combinations of these images. So my approach is that I have a concept. I have quite clear conceptual ideas in my head, and then depending on the specific exhibition, specific topics that we choose, I select images, and then sometimes I do blow them up, sometimes they become huge banners, sometimes they are a bit cut, sometimes I create collages, so I completely interfere with the image itself. So I would say I'm quite free, and I don't know, maybe that's something that could be discussed, how much we can actually interfere with this kind of archival material. But that was my approach until now. At least the book is kind of more or less trying to keep that initial like size and way it looked, except for they are all black and white. So I changed them into grayscale as we had to kind of unify them. As you can imagine, some of them had a bluish tonation, some of them had a... but we don't know how the originals looked also. So I mean, oftentimes it's a copy of a copy of a copy, like you know, a bastard image photographed by someone from something. And so I mean, it's... In that case, the idea was not to focus on the original. The idea was not to... that was not the aim of the project. The project is really about telling a story from these bad quality images and seeing how we can construct a narrative out of that.
Yeah, I think this constructing new worlds in some way. This is also a very big theme now in contemporary art. Let's say dictionary, and I was once, I forgot the name of the artist. He's a very important artist. I think he's from Lebanon. Yes, he also creates this. He creates fictional, you know. He creates these fictional narratives that sometimes you don't know actually should you believe them or not, or is he totally...
You're talking about Walid Rat and the
Yes.
famous Atlas Group project where it's a project that talks about Lebanese wars, and it's created as an archive with like a group of historians, but actually when you go deeper into this project, you realize that it's all made up. That's all Walid Rat. Most of these images were made by him. So yeah, it was a crazy, but it's already like 20 years old now. It became like an iconic project in art.
Yeah, I remember it now because as you were telling me, I know that you get images from the internet. Probably it's quite easy, or maybe to scan them or find them where they are from. But in some way, the narrative that you're trying to create is also a true narrative that you're trying to communicate the research, or is it sometimes also a speculation in some way?
Of course, it's always a speculation. I mean, you know, I do it subjectively. I will never pretend that I'm a scientist here in that sense that I have everything fact-checked. It's a visual work. I mean, it's a sequence. It's like the way that images are put together, the way they're repeating. There are like certain ideas that I had behind this work, and I wanted it to be conveyed specifically in the book. In exhibitions, it works a bit differently. So no, I mean, what is true? I mean, you're opening so many difficult topics now. I can't answer this quickly. So I would say no. Of course, it's a speculation. It's a kind of a storytelling, I would say. But I like asking questions, and I like to. I don't feel I'm giving answers. It's more like opening new ways of looking at things. So here it's a tryout of seeing if we can try to access a non-anthropocentric perspective somehow, even though we're using human-made artifacts, human-made documents. I don't know whether it's really possible, but I think even asking these questions and see, like, trying to look for possibilities already like an interesting gesture. You know, it shifts things. It kind of shakes things.
Thank you very much. I like I will take a closer look at the book, and yeah. So thank you for that. So another question. I will go back to the thing that we were talking a little bit before. I think it's also a very important topic, but in some way I'll ask again a similar question. So if you're creating a new view, a new perspective, so how important is for others to see it, or do you think that they would recognize it in the same way? So how to make something that people, so the message will be communicated in the right manner. So maybe to give an example, so you create an image, you have a perspective on it, but let's say the Western world already has a perspective on something. How to change this perspective? So what, of course, the tool can be also art or many different methodologies, but in your art practice, how do you try to convey this message? What are, let's say, your tools or your secret tricks to shift the mindset of someone? Yeah. Or not to shift, maybe it's a little bit too strong a word.
I don't know, intuition. Intuition, I don't know how to say it. Intuition? Yeah, but in a kind of way, I cannot, as she said, it's like open the possibility, and in a kind of way, like changing thing for place, like changing the perspective, as you also say. And I think that changed everything. It's like how we are seen and how we see. It's like in all my project, it's something that I play a lot with the sequence, because I think that it's so important for the project. That was realized in my email when I was like investigating this topic. Yeah, I think that I don't have any magic tricks or something. I think that I was really interested about what you just said. It was like open the possibility, changing things from place. I'm like more like in that kind of way. But I think also that no, I don't know. It's like I get lost. But I was thinking about something that you asked. Could you ask me again?
Yeah, I'll try to.
It was a long question.
Yeah, I always give long questions.
Yeah.
So so let's say in general the basic thing that I was trying to provoke was the whole idea. So are you trying to give an alternative reality in some way to something that is already established, or you're just trying to open it up let's say the mindset of someone, and then they can create their own view. But let's say the trick here is, if it's already a Western person, he will see it again in the same way as
I think it's
before,
my perspective in a kind of way. I also like what you say, that it's not that scientific way of seeing. It's like a personal way of seeing. It's like an artistic way of seeing. So I always love, like, I don't know, like the people are seeing the image create new imaginaries. Someone told me that the people were, when they mount the exhibition, start to think in a lot of stories that was happening to me when I was creating the pictures, and I think that it's something that it's amazing. And I can share later my story, I can share later my perspective of why I did this or did that, but in a kind of way, I like to work with that ambiguity when you don't really know, when you are like talking about this topic, when you read the text, you understand in a kind of way, but there's a lot of mysterious thing around the image. So I think that if I have to say that I have that freak or something, I love the mystery of the image. I love using that in my practice, but if you want to come back to the other topic that I think is more spicy in a kind of way, I think that in particular, I want to say I want to say something that I say like so casually, but I want to say it better, because I said that the history of photography is made in Europe, in the North America. It's not just because it's like, it's how the history, like with an epical age, it's saying Latin America has a lot of history of photography that is not known, that is not investigated. Africa also, all the continents, it has a lot to say that is not made in the history, like what they are telling to when you start studying also, I don't know, photography, they don't say a lot of names because they don't know where are these names. So I think that now this practice of archive start to investigate these authors, and we, like the new generation or something, we are trying to create another way of seeing the things, because I don't know, it's like I don't feel like that young anymore, but in a kind of way, I think that we bring new blood to debate these kind of topics that, I don't know, 10 years ago, at least as I talked with some of my teachers and stuff, was not said. And it was for me a big surprise that coming to Europe, this is my first time living so long in Europe. I've been here like 1 year, and I don't see like a lot of discuss about this topic also. So it's like, okay, what the fuck? What is going on? We have to talk more about that perspective, and we have to open up more, I don't know, the views, and we have to bring, I think, like more perspective from another places. Yeah, that's it.
Super, thank you very much. Yeah, do we still have time? How are we on the time schedule? Because we were late. Oh, okay. So sorry. We can do it after hours. Yeah, just to be democratical. So, because we were late, we will have 1 hour. We started late, so we have. Yes, we will have 5 minutes more. So, thank you for. I hope you don't have to pay extra time for this place, you know. Okay, super, good. So yes, so the question for you, in some way, I don't know if it's too personal for you or not. You know, you can decide or answering or not, because a few times you said that you don't want to not talk about politics in some way, but you don't want to talk about directly the protests and Iran and everything. Mm-hmm. Can you maybe, you don't need to say why you're not talking, but can you say something about that? You know?
No, it's something that I usually mention. The thing is that, as I mentioned before, it's not about the revolution itself. What I'm trying to emphasize is that when as a person from the Middle East bring up an idea, something like this, the more question is about the content of the image the revolution. They're more curious about the part of the history, but I'm not trying to focus. I'm emphasizing on the context of the work, which is about that relationship, and I'm trying to talk about the material of this project was these images, because I'm from Iran. So I'm not going to work with the images of the Chile or Argentina, right? So I try to be close to what I'm close to. And that's why I use the images of the revolution. And that mentioning is not about something that is sensitive or I'm trying to like censor it. No, it's just the place that I'm trying to show, to fight for it, I think. Because as a person from Iran, when you're talking about photography or any kind of like medium of art, when you slightly have a kind of like political works, people are more curious about what are you thinking. So that's what I'm trying to like educate people probably, because I don't really go for the tag of the political work, because I'm not talking about any politics in these images, because I don't know the background of these people. Obviously, those people who are participating are from a different background who were doing the revolution. So if we want to know about the revolution in Iran, it was happening by different groups of people from different background, from the communist to Islamic Republican, and all of them were participating. So I'm not sure about the background of these people. So so when I don't know these backgrounds, I'm not sure what should I say about this. And yeah, I think that's the story that when we were talking. I told you that I'm sometimes like get upset that people get more interested and the questions comes from that side. What do you think about the revolution? Is it a good or bad thing? And I'm never gonna answer this. So is the revolution is a good or bad thing? Who knows the answer? So I'm never making a statement about these things. And of course, I'm not a politician and I'm not a historian. So I'm trying to focus on what I studied or what I'm like have to focus on. I think that's main thing that I'm trying to educate my audience.
Yeah, super, thank you. Very good answer. You could also be a politician, you know. So no, it's a joke. It's a joke. Yes. So for the last. No, no, no. No, you answered so diplomatically, you know. So it's very hard to get to this point. A good politician, not a bad politician. So yeah, for let's say what I really liked about what you said, I think I thought about it a lot. I never managed to articulate because it's in essence it's a question about why are we doing art. You have certain topics that can be explained also through verbalization, can be performed or anything else. But what you said, I think it's very interesting that you try to, in some way, not to make an illustration of something, but you're trying to use the visual media to present an idea so people can imagine what consequences can something like that have. If you already can say something about that, I'm very happy. You know.
Yeah, keep going if you want.
No, so just to finish, it's one thing that maybe I have a question again about it is the visualization. So how do you decide on, let's say, which faces do you use, how to render them? Is this an artistic decision or is this a template that everybody's using and you're just reusing it?
I mean, it's always difficult to figure out visually which way I'll be going because it starts from a low text here, where all my project starts with something I read or an article or law being passed or new surveillance tools, and so it always starts by an kind of research into the technological part of it, and I try to use the technology itself as a visual element. So for here, I mean, for example, for the emotions, these are the facial expressions that the algorithm is trained on, but like I created 3D models and I created like the blue marks and the red marks so that the different like facial expressions are more clear. So like I try to like curate in one part, but yeah, I just have like, and Fernando will know it as well, I have a lot of visual material of a project, and like I just create a sort of database of all these algorithms collecting imagery, reworking imagery, and then I have an opportunity for an exhibition or something, and then I'm there with like, oh look, I have all these images, what space do you have, and what can we do? And then comes the most difficult part actually of like, well, what do I show, what elements are important, how do I construct a narrative as well? Because I mean, to go to the first part of your question, like I don't want to tell people, oh, this is good or this is bad, but I want just that it's to show people of, oh, this exists and this is how it works. And then obviously I want them to come to the conclusion that it's not great, but like that they come to it by themselves. Like I won't directly say, oh, this is bad. So yeah, it's, and I never know, like I never know beforehand of how visually it will look like. I don't have a clear idea, and it's just by trying things out, seeing the results. Yeah, here for the different movements, like I was looking up what does the algorithm see as suspicious movements in crowds and in people, and so to visualize that, I use these 3D models, which I explained earlier this morning was from a very strange program that is used to make like fictional 3D porn, but which was really easy to use, like with these poses and create these realistic models, which I then, yeah, my visual part of the project is actually my research into, yeah, the algorithms and this technology.
Yeah, now, thank you very much to all. Now, public, you can take the microphones there too.
For the questions, right?
Yeah, for the questions or critiques or comments. Does the participants have any questions for each other? We can do it later. Then we can finish because also the church is marking the end, and so thank you very much all for coming.
We have now half an hour or a bit less. Yeah, how many minutes we have, Sabina, of a break? 15 minutes of break.